Okay, hey, what's up, guys? How's it going? Huge Fat Man back at it again with another video. So it's been a long time. I'm back in school, and that's, the main reason. Um, I'm doing other stuff, and yeah, you get the idea. Um, yeah, but I've been working on this kind of explosion project, as it would be, just audio implementation for explosions, etc., etc. And I've been getting it to a sweet spot, and I've specifically been working on this as a precursor to a audio project, a video that I'm gonna do later down the line that has to do with a certain flying vehicle from a certain popular franchise. So this was a precursor to that, and this is just me getting more familiar with just all the audio classes, audio mixings, and lots of just different sounds that are going to come up in that project that I want to work on later in the future. And so, which as things go, and as I work on stuff, I come across issues and problems, and I learn things along the way. And so, to preface this video a little bit, this is going to be probably more of a longer video. I'm going to be talking about sound classes, sound mixes, editing these things in runtime, and some of the nodes that go along with that, of course, and blueprints, and just some of the problems that I've ran into while doing this. And yeah, so I'll be kind of doing that. Of course, I don't know everything, and I'm still learning. The Unreal audio system is no small feat. It is a large system, and there are many parts to it. I mean, it is one solid chunk of the entire experience of being in a virtually generated world. And so, yes, it's a large thing, and I'm slowly chipping away at it by learning new stuff and doing cool projects that I enjoy, and then being able to learn along the way. So, anyway, just to preface this video, I'm gonna go ahead and jump into the project here for you guys. Do a little demonstration of what I've been working on. Then obviously that'll make it a little easier for you to understand as I continue to talk about it. So it's going to be probably a little bit of a longer video, like I said. This, just to also preface again, this level that I'm in right now it looks extremely familiar to a level that you've all seen before in many of the other previous videos. But this level's actually been recreated pretty accurately from another project, and so now I'm on a more generalized project that I've had for a while, and I only did that because of the certain flying vehicle I want to make. I wanted to have some particles, and a lot of my particles were on this, and I didn't want to migrate all my assets from here over to the other audio project, and so I just brought the audio stuff to here. And so anyway, more or less the same level, not super useful information for you guys, but just want to let you know. So I've recreated stuff, and I redid my little kind of what do you call them, the little instruments I had in box form that I could move around and stuff. And so I did it in a single box form. I'll use this to demonstrate a couple things, but just to show it off for you guys, to give you an understanding of kind of the environment we're in, and what this box does, so that you can hear how the audio of the explosion affects just general audio in the world, and which is half the point of this box, just to help me audio test. So the box plays music, as it would be, and so I'm going to get copywritten immediately, but I don't care. I don't make money. Not yet, but anyway. So Q is turn it on and off, and I can let it go and whatever. I can grab it and change the song. You can see the song top left gets printed. Anyway. So, and then of course we have our rooms with our audio volumes, etc., etc. Very reverb. You get the idea. Smaller, more wooden, a little less reverb. Alright, anyway. Also, these footsteps, you can see how fast they're moving top left. It's like ridiculously fast. So the footsteps are like super quick. If I bring it down a notch, back to maybe around 200, the footsteps start sounding more normal. So anyway, that's just so you all know what that crazy footstep stuff is. So that's why I'm moving at like crazy speeds. What we can also do that I've put into the game for the sake of the explosion, I've implemented slow-mo into the classes, so when I press G, it'll bring us to 1/10 speed. But when I'm cold, I'll demonstrate that a second. I'm cold. Anyway, when I'm in shadow, grab that. There's a feeling within. All right, so that's what these all is. Very straightforward. Explosion is right over there. So I'm gonna press the button and explosion time. Pretty straightforward. Effects are not what I'm trying to do here, ladies and gentlemen. But once again, I have some particles put together from the Star Wars explosion video. You can go check that out if you want to see it. But I just did some increase in particles and did some other stuff. But anyway, the particles are mostly for demonstration purposes. So that's what these are. But as you can see, we have this big shockwave that fires out. And if we actually head on over to the back here, you can really start to see the delay of sound moving through the air. And so I'll push the explosion. And so this is actually as close as I could get it to accurate to real life. And so this really is moving at the speed of sound, the explosion that's going off. And so half the whole point of the ring distortion that you see shooting out is to just give us a visual representation of exactly how fast that is. And as you would have imagined, it's extremely fast. I think it's like 134 meters per second. I'd have to go back and look at that, but it's very, very quick. Yeah, I think it's maybe it's 100, maybe it's 340 meters per second. Every Unreal unit is a centimeter, and so that's moving at, I think, 34,000 Unreal units per second, which is pretty quick. So I'll play that out. So let's do it in slow motion. How about it, right? So I'll slow us down, and then let's press the explosion. You can see how quick that moves. But anyway, one of the things I can also do for that is I have a couple debug things in place. So let's meters traveled distant. Let's do meters traveled. This will literally show you how quickly it's actually moving, which is very, very fast because this is the speed of sound. So anyway, so then I'll press it and you'll see a top left. So there, you can see how long it takes to travel every single distance until it eventually reaches our player character, right? Then we can also put it into slow mode, and I'll show you guys that. So that's when we hear it. So that was the first part of trying to build a realistic explosion, which is kind of the goal. Not sure if I mentioned that, but that's mostly what I was getting at, is trying to build a realistic explosion for the sake of future projects. So anyway, yeah. So the meters per second is pretty cool. I'll probably turn that off. I don't need to keep that going. But anyway, let me continue to demonstrate just some of the things. Most of the stuff is going to be an attenuation, but let me show you a couple more things. Obviously, we've got a little bit of blockage for walls. Once again, attenuation, nothing crazy. A little bit of LPF on there, low pass filter, nothing crazy. But I didn't do a whole lot with necessarily wall blockage, but I did do a little bit. The big part kind of comes up right here, and this is where I'm going to spend a lot of time in the video probably talking about. But as I get closer, and let's bring the block speed a little lower here. I'm going to get a little closer here. I'm gonna get really close, like right up on it. So anyway, so that is the tinnitus effect. As you get closer and closer, tinnitus gets longer, and the explosion gets more muted. It's a lower LPF or low pass filter on there for the frequencies that are allowed to pass. And so that's the main bulk of this. Aside from the stuff which is a little less obvious to actually see or hear in this scenario would be the attenuations of the explosion. Which, yeah, so the first thing you have to realize, and it's simultaneously for myself, is when you're working in audio and you want it to be a certain way. First thing check is the attenuation. Attenuation really does take care of the vast majority of stuff you're going to be doing. As far as trying to do interesting or unique audio stuff, I mean, it really does take care of most of it. Like just straight up volume over distance, and then spatialization, air absorption for different frequency cutoffs over distance, and so it really has a lot of stuff going on. Occlusion, reverb, priorities. I mean, it's some makes sense, right? You could do a lot, and so most of the stuff you're gonna, if you want to make a very high detailed audio experience, a lot of the stuff is going to be inside of the attenuation because that's kind of where they take care of most of it. Um, but anything that's not taken care of there, obviously, it's where you have to start getting your hands obviously more dirty, right? I don't know what that's simulating. So I guess we'll jump. Where do we want to jump into? I got the main two blueprints are open here. The player character and the explosion. Because of course we have all my assets that I could go ahead and talk about too. Let me go to audio here. Let's start with the assets because that would probably be the better start. Smaller building blocks, and then we'll work into the stuff, the blueprints that use those building blocks. These are all just tests. Don't worry about these. I was having an issue that I will talk about later, which is why I was just jacking around with those. So don't worry about those. Obviously, I have a reverb on the world here. I mean, you could literally see it there. I was fooling around with that just before I started. Audio map and A10s. So A10 I already showed you, pretty straightforward. Of course, the reference tracks A10, which is what that red cube was playing those. It has that attenuation. Or of course, our Metasounds, the Tinnitus Metasound, which is the ringing into the ears, the explosion, and then the audio tester, which is of course just the reference tracks. Let's see, classes. Do I want to go into classes? There's still some spillover as far as the classes, so some of these aren't in use because once again I had a problem I was testing. But let's go straight into, let's do the meta sounds, and then I'll talk about the classes, and then I'll go into the blueprints. Yeah. So let's hit it up. Explosion meta sound, right? I'll get the tinnitus one open too. Maybe they were already open, but anyway. And oh, there you go. Yeah. Explosion tinnitus. So let's start with the explosion. Explosion, really straightforward. Where did I get the explosion? These are actually, who would have guessed, ripped from BF2. As much as I would love to sound design an explosion myself, and I believe I'm fully capable of doing that, it's not the purpose of this. So I'm just going to go ahead and get some good explosions and continue from there. So I got some good explosions from BF2. These are pretty straightforward core bases. They have a lot of them, but I chose 5 specifically that I thought were really applicable here and had some really solid bass that I could manipulate, hopefully in many different ways. And so that's why I chose those ones. I feel like I had another purpose behind that, but I don't quite remember at the moment. So anyway, really straightforward for the explosion one. Just play your meta sound, get your random, put your random float values. I do have a little bit of pitch shift. It is nothing too crazy, so it's just a little bit of modulation there. And yeah, just put it down. No modulation audio. The audio just stays the same. And then yeah, that one's pretty straightforward. We have our and I'm setting you guys up for later, which is why I'm showing you this. But obviously, the explosion bit 10 we already kind of checked out. Like I said, most of your stuff will be in there. But then the AM, which is just for audio map, big explosion. sound class is what is holding this guy. And so anyway, but that's all for this. There's nothing else going on in that. Tinnitus one, it's pretty much straightforward as well. We just have an LFO. This is just add a little bit of wobble and shake. I know that a lot of Call of Duty and lots of different games have this tinnitus sound, right? It's kind of a classic one for a lot of COD games, honestly. But I didn't use exactly that frequency, and neither did I have it stay the same the whole way through. I do add a little bit of LFO to it just to give it some shape as it goes through. It's very, very light LFO, but it just a little bit of modulation I feel like goes a long way. Granted, modulation can also cause problems if you repeatedly click. If you have like 5 explosions that they go off sequentially and they're all a second apart, the modulation between all these different the Metasound assets of this getting played, it'll sound like the tinnitus is just randomly starting at different frequencies because of this LFO versus it all being seamless if it's just always the same frequency, right? So modulation can have its cons as well as its pros. But I've gone ahead and used it. Granted, all of that can be solved with some blueprints and when this one plays, get the frequency of that one and apply it to that to start, yada, yada, yada. Complexity increases. But generally speaking, there's an answer to most problems. But anyway, I will say, as you can see, this is pretty straightforward. I mean, we get our randoms, put them into our LFO, and that goes into our frequency. And then we get a sustain input, right, for our trigger, how long this is going to stay up, and then we get a decay for when we start to go ahead and fade out our tinnitus. On finished, when it's done, trigger delay, it's same as sustain to bring the audio down to 0, so you don't hear anything. Pretty straightforward. I will say that in my Star Wars Music System Part 2 video, I talked about not being able to bind things on outputs. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I can bind things on output with the on finished. Looking at it again, yeah, maybe that guy in the forums was right. I can bind things on outputs, but only their outputs. And so, to the extent that it's already a part of the Metasound, like on finished, right? Like I literally can't pull it out or delete it. I literally can't access it here. I'm pretty sure. Can I? On play, I can access for whatever reason. On finished is just here it is. One shot on finished. But yeah, there's just yeah. See, it's a trigger as well, but and yet. I can't use my own outputs is the bottom line of what I'm getting at. If I make a fade out and I turn it into an output, the same as on finished, I cannot go to my Metasound and say bind on fade out. Nope, not there, right? But of course, if we say bind on finished, voila. So yeah, they are kind of... If you want to use the already built-in outputs for Metasounds, then yes, they are useful, and yes, you can bind things to them. If you're trying to make your own stuff in Metasounds, presently, at least with the outputs, they are in fact useless, and you can't do jack squat. So I am not sure what the variable outputs are, if those are useful for anything either, but I'm going to guess not. So the guy on the forums said everything's useless on the outputs. I'm saying that the triggers are clearly useless. The variables, I'm going to make a guess that they're useless. And the only thing that is useful are going to be outputs that are already built in. And because apparently you could see, but there's certain things you can bind to. So anyway, but not a whole ton and not custom ones, sadly. Moving on. That's just a point to be made and something to keep in mind. So there's your explosion, there's your tinnitus. Those are our big boys. So let's jump into some of the more meat stuff that I was messing around with. So I'm gonna pull this up. This is I had a few problems that are actual like real instant like issues. I'm not sure how to exactly address some of them, but I'm just gonna try and keep myself on track because gosh dang it. Fixing, and then let's do the explosion dynamic tinnitus. Okay, okay. So let's start with kind of where I was going is just jump into the mix. So we have our, and I'll just show them to you classes. Um, this is useless. This is useless. This is useless. And yeah, I'm gonna just delete those. What do we have, huh? Huh? What are they doing here? Tinnitus 2 and Masterclass 3? Big explosion. Oh. Oh, okay. Okay, so I didn't get this part of the I guess the system together for you guys exactly, considering apparently I yeah, I didn't quite do it. Maybe I'll just do reference tracks and we'll call it a day by putting this at 0.4, huh? There we go. Anyway, that's something else. Don't worry about it. So I'll go ahead and delete these guys because they are useless. Useless! What's this one reference? What is this? Yeah, that's what I thought. I don't think there's anything here. I'm going to delete that. So I'm just trying to, probably should clean this up before I start the video, but that's okay. I want to get them out of the way so you guys aren't wondering. Make things a little cleaner. Fix up redirectors. Okay, so basically I've got my master mix or master class, right? And all these other are going to be children in that. So I open them up and you can see that we have all the others are children here. We got our reference tracks, which are songs, footsteps, which you I'm sure are annoyed with and have heard many of. Big explosion, quite literal, and then explosion, the tinnitus part of the explosion. So there you go. And we don't have anything here yet. We can just get rid of that. And so that's our big explosion. Anyway, so as you can see, our big explosion, what was I messing around with for a second there? That was this. It's just making sure that our sounds are a little lower when an explosion actually goes off. You know, it ducks just the rest of the sounds when the explosion goes off. So nothing super fancy, but pretty straightforward. Maybe I'll put that to 0.6. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I made this in 2 seconds as you guys just watched, so it's nothing crazy. But what's happening is that obviously we have our master class, and I can do some controls here, but we have our tinnitus that's under there. This is pretty straightforward. There's no changes there. Big explosion. Once again, a little bit interesting because we've added a submix, which just simply ducks the other sounds presently in our level or in our mix, etc., etc. And so then, you know, a little bit of ducking, and that's it. And then we have our footsteps, which, once again, straightforward, nothing here, and reference tracks, nothing here. And so one of the things that I was originally doing with those other classes those other audio classes I deleted, is I was mixing inside of the master class here. And so I would have multiple levels of master classes, like masterclass 1, then masterclass 2 to handle these things, then masterclass 3 to handle these things. And I was mixing them like that in here, and then doing individual mixes on this. And I watched, and I don't know how well it was working. It could have potentially worked, maybe, but I was watching Valkyrie Sound. It's another YouTuber who does Unreal Audio, and he mixed everything inside of a master sound mix, which sounds right, doesn't it? A sound mix versus the sound class. Why would I mix in here? So let me just, I mean, I have all these tabs to my right of content drawers, but I'm just going to do it all in front of you guys. Where was I? Okay, mixes in here. So anyway, I have my master mix here, and let's open these up. And so this is where I'm going to get into the first thing and just talk about Unreal audio mixing. So Valkyrie Sound had a master mix, sound mix asset in which he put all of his sound classes in here and then mixed them in here. And so I went ahead and changed the way I did it and did it this way, the way that he was doing it, by having your mixing and audio changing done inside of a sound mix class instead of inside of a sound class, and then having a bunch of sub things to handle that. Um, and obviously that works only to the extent that you have your master mix applied at event begin play and set that as the base sound mix. And so that's what I'm doing inside of the level blueprint here. One of the things that I don't understand about this, and I'm unsure how to fix this issue, and it's not an issue for me presently, but I always think about the expandability of systems. And so if I am doing it the way Valkyrie Sound was doing it, by only mixing inside of a sound mix class and then mixing all my sound classes inside of here, if I do it in here, every single... I am unsure how to... how do I put this? I'm unsure how to mix sub classes and their specific things. Such as if I had in this scenario, I have a master class, and then I do have another class that takes care of footsteps and reference classes, and I just name it master class 2. Why not? How do I mix footsteps and reference tracks while they're inside of the master class 2? Because I could mix master class 2 in here, and granted I could set the footsteps in here too, but I'd have to do everything individually, right? And so I don't know, man. There's a well, actually maybe that would work. Never mind. I think I was... Because I could put, hypothetically, I could put the master class 2 in that master mix, and I could put the footsteps and reference tracks in there with it. And I assume that would work because these are all just multipliers. And so I could still have my, very acute mixing 0.2. Where's the reference tracks 0.3. But then I could also have my my overall master of those things still mixed in this because they are all multipliers. Okay, well, I answered my own question by just talking about it. That works. Hypothetically, that should work just fine. Okay, cool. Still a lot of tabs on your master class eventually. If you have a big game, how many tabs are you going to have? Like 100 or something? Like, what are we... Anyway, luckily you could change the position of... Or at least I think I can. Yeah, you could change the position of them, so hopefully you could organize it just fine. But expandability is still always something I'm worried about. All right, moving on. So that answers that question. How do you mix the lower things inside of that? So that takes care of this. Not sure how that works for the children. There you go. And just put the children with the master anyway. Next problem I had. This is where things start to get real problematic. It is the I was having a lot of trouble making that explosion tinnitus sound work. There are, and so this is where I should go over this first, and then I'll go over that second note there. So let's talk about sound mixes in runtime, which is inside of blueprints. I did not save this, don't worry about it. So let's go into our, where are we? Let's go into, we can get rid of this, big explosion, yada, yada, yada. Let's go into our, where did they go? Did I just get rid of them? I guess I did. Let's go into our explosion. And let's grab our character. Well, yeah, why not? Probably won't use it, but anyway. So, probably won't use this. Time dilation is pretty straightforward. Well, I mean, you gotta know what you're doing. Just, here, I'll show you. Time dilation. Press a key, flip-flop, set your time dilation, and change your pitch so it sounds slow. And yeah, there you go. Change your pitch with the master class. Once again, I'm about to explain these kind of sound nodes. Yeah, then where are we going with this? Oh yeah, this is just my I totally forgot about this. Oh my goodness. In this level, and same with the next project I'm gonna do, which this is a precursor to, I was wanting to learn more about blueprint interfaces, and so I did everything that I could using blueprint interfaces between the interaction between the blueprints and the character. Granted, I don't. I remember it not being the best idea, like not the most efficient, neither the best way to do that. Blueprint communication between the character and what I'm doing, at least for this situation, using blueprint interfaces. But once again, remember, I don't care. I'm just trying to use different things and learn different things about them. Bottom line, blueprint interfaces are extremely simple. Anyway, but they're helpful for moving functionality around without and dicking around with copying nodes, etc., etc. So anyway, sending that to my interface, which sends it to the what the flip is that sending it to? I'm assuming it sends it to the explosion, maybe, or just maybe to everything. Anyway, I don't know if I want to find out where I'm sending that. It's not worth the time. It sends it somewhere. I'm sure you would find it out anyway. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's all we need. Well, what is this for? Interact? Yeah, it's just interacting with the kind of push. This is just a test. Push sound mix. Okay. Okay, so let's jump into our explosion, which is really where things get interesting. So I'll explain the explosion, then I'll go into explaining the actual nodes. I have not seen anyone on YouTube talk about this. Not that I can see, unless it's another hour video like mine, and you have to dig through it and trudge through it. But and also the documentation on these nodes are like complete. Well, it's non-existent aside from the description of the node itself. So it's pretty poop. There's no examples or jack squat of how to use it. So unless you're going to test the and I'll show you, unless you're going to text these sound mix nodes here by yourself, you're not going to find out what they do, basically, unless you, once again, test them and you have context, etc. So I'm going to just tell you guys what they do in a second here. So anyway, explosion. It's a BP I have put out here. Where are we? There it is. Explosion. So we're just spawning the actual particle effect. You guys don't need to see particle. You know what it does. Here's just a debug for player distance. It just tells you where the distance is. Nothing crazy there. Simultaneously with this debug over here, this is what's doing that whole cool meters per second thing. I just have a calculate that in a pen for the prints, and so you can see the meters per second. Honestly, that's really cool to see. I'm pretty happy with that. That's just fun. This is a fun part. Detect when the player is reached. So we're not actually detecting where the player is and then like doing a sound thing for that, which is what I was doing just initially for testing. But we want to be as accurate as possible. This is the way to do it. You basically use your units per second. Okay, so I guess it's how fast was that? 30. So is it 332 miles per second? Anyway, this is 33,000. Obviously 33,200 centimeters per second, which is the how fast sound travels. Centimeters are unreal units, just by the way, so there you go, units per second. And then we have basically our ground cover. So every single event tick, which is the fastest we can get our executions going, is we are calculating how fast we're traveling over each event tick, and then we're adding that to our ground covered. And then when our ground covered is either equal to or greater than the distance of the player presently, then that's when we fire off our our play sound and do all the rest of our stuff. And then, of course, it closes up our gate again so that we don't have this running all the time. And then it opens it up to, yeah, so that's all this does, is it sets ground cover back to 0 and then opens up the actual test to find out how fast our sound is traveling, and then get the player as. The reason why we do it this way, and the reason why it's the most accurate, is because if you were to just test, get the distance to the player and do that, if the player is moving at all, that distance is constantly changing. And so the fact that the mere fact that we have a delay between when we want to play the sound and, like when we want to have this activated and when we want to have the player hear it, that fact alone means that we need to compensate for the player's movement in 3D space, just so that it, if we want to be the most accurate. Yeah, it wouldn't usually matter, but to the extent of the project that this is a precursor to, you're going to be in a vehicle that's moving very fast, and so that whether that sound gets to that vehicle at a certain point or not, it's like it really starts to matter making sure that it's as accurate as possible. And even if it's not a vehicle, look at how fast I can move. I mean, I can start moving real fast, and the sound needs to be it can't calculate once and then just play that when it reaches, because you can be moving anywhere. And so it turns into a find the player kind of code, over the duration of while we're finding the player. So anyway, I'm happy with the code because it's very simplistic, very simple, and yet it achieves a very cool function, right? And so anyway, once we found a player, play our explosion sound to the player, and this is where I did not take the time to organize this. Sorry, guys. This is where the tinnitus parts come into play. So without tinnitus, it would end right there. But this is where we start getting tinnitus. So I have a variable, an array of floats. This is simply my tinnitus ranges. Oh gosh, how should I start off explaining this? Once again, like I said, this is where I came to some problems. Let's go ahead and start by saying we'll jump back to why I have these 3 tinnitus mixes and why I have split this into 3 separate mixes. And so because that leads, so I'll come back to explain exactly why that is, but you'll probably figure it out as I just get into this. Dynamic ducking, not possible. So that's where we are talking about this. Low pass and node mix set, exactly. This is exactly where this is. And air absorption, kind of got that set, but anyway. Kind of got that set. I didn't really get it completely where I wanted it for you guys, but I got the basics down. That's all I need for this video, all right? No worries. No worries. I'll do more later. Oh, notes I could change the sound mix. Okay, and I don't think there are, so I'm just gonna do that. Okay, so let's talk about our sound mix nodes, gentlemen, because this is where things get a bit piss poor in my opinion. There's not very many nodes, and it's not very comprehensive, which is where maybe C++ needs to be brought into the play in order to actually do stuff in a more complex manner for these things, simply to the extent that you can't, just the nodes we have right now are just kind of sorry, it doesn't make me entirely happy. Sorry, I duplicated that one, gosh dang it. Just to the extent that there's obviously some limitations. Granted, I've experienced plenty of limitations with Unreal, at least inside of blueprints. And so I'll have to jump into C++ soon and start seeing if I can find out more ways to make the impossible possible. But who knows, right? Who knows? So let's talk about these, because I feel like not a whole lot of people talk about them. And of course, like I said, documentation sucks for these, because it's just the description on here. That's all it is the documentation. So, real helpful, right? It's not any more helpful than just the node itself in the engine. So that's kind of lame. Let's start with these guys. These are going to be more simpler than the overrides. So, what the heck is a sound mix, right? A sound mix is pretty much exactly what you'd imagine it is. This video should be for more intermediate people, but anyway, sound mixes are just ways to I guess mix your sound, and you can do sub sound mixes inside of your classes in order to have it that when a sound is played in this class, it'll apply this sound mix, so you can have automatic explosion ducking, i.e. right here, right? So that can duck your other classes and your other sounds, right? Pretty straightforward sound mixes. So you need to set a base sound mix. The reason why you don't have to, but if you don't set it, then what the hell are you doing? Because your sounds will just be exactly what you've put them to, and it'll just default to the normal sound that's in your Metasound or in your class. So, but if we're gonna be mixing, make sure to set your base sound mix. In this case, it would be your master mix or whatever it is. So you set your base sound mix, and then you could start using these guys. So, I mean, technically you could do whatever, but it's obviously these go in tandem. So push a sound mix. So if I have my base sound mix and I say, oh wow, I want to push a test sound mix, for instance, in this test sound mix, it's just got some stuff that I want to test, right? I want to bring up the volume, or I want to bring down the LPF here, a low pass filter or whatever. Then you can push that sound mix onto the audio system, which it says there. You can push multiple sound mixes onto the audio system at once. If you wanted to push the test sound mix, and then you wanted to push, I don't know, Tinnitus 1 mix, you can push multiple audio mix modifiers onto the audio system at once. You cannot push the same sound mix multiple times if it's already on there. So for instance, if I just duplicate this and do this, you can't have two mixes set on there. It's not going to say, oh, test mix 1, test mix, _1, test mix _2, and then continuously apply the test mix parameters and modifiers to the actual audio system. It's not going to do that. You can only apply this once until you get rid of it. Otherwise it'll just stay there, right? So obviously, like I said, you can change this, and then you can apply different sound mixes, and you can apply as many of these as you want. You could have a long chain of different sound mixes that you can apply. It's all good. They will all be applied. All these different modifiers, hypothetically, all these different modifiers to the same class. So in this one, reference tracks in our test one, right? And gosh dang, I gotta remember where I'm at. And in this one, Tinnitus _1, we also have our reference tracks. And so this volume adjuster is just a multiplier, and so that will be applied with our other sound mix, and these will just continue to be multipliers on top of each other, but these can all be on the audio system at the same time. That's all I'm trying to say. So you can either, with that in mind, you can clear all of the mix modifiers you've set. So we could just clear all of these at once by using this off. You could clear them all off the audio system, or you could pop a specific one from the audio system. So we could just pop this out of there, and then the rest will still be there. So that's what these do. Once again, these have no effect on the base sound mix. The base sound mix will always be there once you set it. From what I know, there's no way to pop this, get rid of this. This is there when you set it. I'm sure you could set the sound mix to something else if you wanted to. Well, you can, obviously. You could set it anytime your base sound mix, but which I guess you could set it to nothing. Set base sound mix. Boom. You set it to nothing if you trigger that. So I think you just turn it off if you wanted to. But anyway, so that's all these nodes do. These have no effect on that. So anyway, that's what those are. To explain them, it's not great explanations. Unless you test them, you won't know that. Now let's get to this. We're talking about our sound mix classes here, which in this they always say sound mix modifier. They're the sound mix classes, or what you put in there. I don't know why the modifier necessarily, but I guess same difference. The modifiers may be a little more helpful as far as word play goes. So set sound mix class override. This literally means I'm gonna pick my master sound mix because, well, why not? And now I'm going to pick a class that's inside of my master sound mix. So let's pick AM Explosion. I'm going to pick AM Big Explosion, right? And now I can change those parameters that are sitting right here. This volume adjuster, this pitch adjuster. And I can change them in runtime right here. And so that's all this does. I have a little bit of fade time, so you don't have clipping, etc., etc. And then, of course, the beautiful apply to children, so it applies to all the rest of the classes that are currently child classes to the big explosion. If I happen to have any child classes, which I don't, so who cares? But it's always, you can turn it off and on if you really want to. I just have it on because why not? Also, I think that naturally is on. So, and then you have the clear sound mix class override. So you, of course, just to fade out, and then whatever these parameters were, we could just clear out whatever we had on there by, once again, selecting our big explosion, and then once again selecting what modifier was that to, or what sound mix was that for. So anyway, that's all these do. Pretty straightforward. Now that we know this, first of all, hopefully that's helpful for anybody who's wondering what the hell these are. And just because I'm a little irritated that there's not a whole lot of documentation on, but anyway, just some examples, that's all I want. Let's talk about where this becomes problematic. So I want a tinnitus effect. Okay, I have my tinnitus sound done and doneer. I made it in a Metasound. But now I want to have some interesting ducking going on, right? I'm not just changing. Where's our tinnitus one? I'm not just changing the volume. Granted, I could, and I could do that in runtime, as you saw with this. I changed the volume. I'm doing something more interesting by using the LPF, the low pass filter here. And I am using that to be my, you could, parentheses, not parentheses, quotation marks, volume adjuster. But this isn't adjusting necessarily the volume. This is just cutting off frequencies. But that's how I want it to be with my tinnitus effect. I think you may understand where I'm going with this. I cannot change the LPF in our runtime node. It doesn't exist here. We have a volume. We have our pitch. Have our fade in time. That's great. We have our apply to children. Where's the LPF? So this is where I get a little confused and unhappy. We've got 3 parameters in here, and yet for whatever reason these 2 parameters were just left out of our node. That's piss poor, but granted, programmers who did this probably were paid nothing, so who knows. But I don't know why that is, but all I could say is that it's frustrating to have some of the parameters for which this applies to and not all of them, which are only 2 more. So this is where my problems arose, because I'm like, I want to have a dynamic changing tinnitus effect based on distance to the explosion, as you guys experienced me showing you guys. But I can't use the LPF, which I want to use for my tinnitus effect. And so I had to create 3 different just tinnitus effects. And inevitably, you could make 100 of these to make it, far more integrated as far as the difference between them, right? You can make 5 of them and then have the difference between them, be whatever you want. But I just simply did 3. 3 is good enough for what I'm doing. And so that sucks. But that's what I've had to do. And so let's now go into this. And so you can see where I have my 3 tinnitus ranges for these 3 different mixes that I want to apply. And so what I'm doing is I'm getting, for each, I'm just testing, is the character within inside of one of these ranges. And if the character is in fact inside of one of these ranges, then we're going to just test. This is just kind of pop whether if I have a mix currently, like a mix modifier applied from a previous set, then we'll just pop that. If not, move on. Don't worry about it. Set float parameter. This is for the sustain. Set our float parameter for decay for our tinnitus. I showed you guys that. And obviously we just have a select, and based on the index that we found ourselves in, which is of course the range. And then we have a select for our mix, right? For the index and the range. So we will set our current mix modifier, and then we will set our current, and then we'll push that mix modifier so that that's the one that we're hearing. So yeah, pretty straightforward. And of course, the next time we hear the explosion, we will pop that mix modifier, and then we'll set another if we need to. Obviously, we set our parameters first. Always do this before your Metasound, ladies and gentlemen. This is just good coding with Metasounds, because I've had a problem where I set play, and then I set my parameters, and I was like, what's going on? And so good programming with Metasounds is always set your parameters before you ever have the play go off, because you're gonna be confused what the hell's happening. And then I simply bind an event. So this is where things are interesting, because I'm having to use 3 separate mixes. I no longer get the privilege to use a passive sound mix, because I need a different passive sound mix happening every time this, anytime this goes off. It could be a different level of LPF. Wait, no, yeah, low pass filter I need. So I because I have to use different sound mixes, I can't have, granted I could have multiple of these, but that doesn't mean that my, that has no bearings on my distance. So anyway, it's not dynamic by having multiple of these. This is all manual setting. You're setting everything manual in here, but I need something dynamic. Literally, I need something dynamic because it's happening based on the player distance. And so I don't get the privilege of using the passive sound mix. Would be super freaking helpful, man. So helpful if I could just use the tools here. So anyway, that's where this part comes in, where I have to, because I don't have the passive sound mix, which will automatically fade out the current sound mix when the sound is finished playing. I have to do that myself. And so on the Metasound finished play, we're going to go ahead and bind that to a pop the sound mix modifier, current modifier. And so when the Metasound finishes playing, the tinnitus sound in this case, we'll pop our current modifier, and that will bring us back into our set base sound mix modifier, right? Our AM master modifier. So that's all that does. I'm doing the passive modifier on my own, which isn't anything super crazy, but you get the idea. So yeah, that's this whole kind of part here. Don't worry about this. I delete that. It's nothing. So there we go. What was I gonna get into? So here's an issue. And this is kind of with just generally. This is just kind of an issue with general mixing, in my opinion. This is a issue with the sound class mix asset. This is an issue that I feel like exists unless I am either ignorant to the solution or I am correct that this is a problem that needs a solution. Is in this scenario that I've just explained, anytime that I add more sounds to my level, in which I definitely will, I would have to go into each of these individual tinnitus mixes, 1, 2, 3, and I would have to then add manually the new classes and then set their frequencies or set their volume or whatever. I'd have to add a new class for the class that I made. I have to go and make another one for the new assets that I made. And I have to do that for that one. I have to do that for this one. And I have to do that for this one to make sure that this effect still holds as I continue to add assets with new classes to my map and to my game, right? In any other scenario. That's a problem. And I don't see a solution to that. There is no affect every single class except these selected classes area inside of the sound mix class asset, which we are currently in. There is no apply these parameters to every class inside of the master class, hypothetically. To every class, to apply it to every class selected, and then you could, I guess, apply to children too. So I could have apply these parameters to the master class and all of its children, except for, and then you have a list of classes that you can make for all the exceptions of the classes that will not have this sound mix applied to it. I don't see that feature here. I don't see it anywhere, and so either it doesn't exist or I don't know where it is. But that is an extremely important feature, so that anytime I add more classes, anytime I add more sounds to my game, I don't have to manually go into not only this, but any other hypothetically, the explosion, big explosion, anything you want to have, any ducking, any effect, any passive mix effect. You want to have it applied to, hypothetically, a great variety of sounds, if not the majority of sounds that play, except for a certain few. And I don't see any feature currently that allows you to do that, which means that you have to manually go into every single sound mix class asset that you want to have special effects on the rest of the sounds in the game, and you have to manually go in and start adding the other classes for the rest of the sounds in the game as you continue to add classes and you continue to add sounds. That's a huge blunder, in my opinion. Now, granted, everything's a work in progress, but that's a big deal to me. That's a big deal to me, and I'm not even making a game right now, and that's a huge deal to me that there's no, apply these parameters to every class except for these classes feature here. So that's one thing I need to get off my chest, is that needs to be a feature if it isn't one. And if it is a feature, please somebody tell me. I need to know how to do that. I need to learn that. That's super, super valuable, because otherwise you do have to do everything manually, as I've said, and that is an exponentially increasing workload that I don't understand, that the workload shouldn't even exist. So anyway, I think I've made my point in that regard, especially on how to fix it, right? Pretty straightforward. Have these parameters apply to all these classes with exception to these classes, right? And have it apply to this class and all of its children. So you don't have to say what classes it applies to. It just applies to everything, or specifically all these classes under this class, and then give us our list of classes that it doesn't apply to so that we can set those, and maybe set specific other parameters for those. Anyway, it's a necessity. I need to know how to do that, and it needs to exist if there's no way presently. Okay, so here we go. That's all of that. Having a mix with class parameters I can't change. I already talked about that. That node needs to be just straight up be simply needs to be fixed and have the rest of the parameters added to it. I don't know why it doesn't already have that. It's really frustrating to me. Where did the parameters just got forgotten? The LPF and the volume center. Like, I haven't even used this, but just for the sake of having it, we need to have it inside of this node, which already seems to have the functionality of this, but they just don't have the rest of the parameters. Very odd to me, very necessary as well, because now I have to do this janky setup instead of just using the node that they've made, because it doesn't have every variable. Anyway, every parameter. Anyway, moving on. So got that. You duplicate. Yeah, so anyway, like I said, there's the solution to that problem that I just talked about is either duplicate and use either having duplicate mixes and then pushing those, which is what I've done here by having duplicate mixes and pushing those, or you have to specifically duplicate the Metasound source and then use separate classes and with separate mixes to have the passive sound mix actually be able to be used in your system. So anyway, I went with the pushing the mixes versus having separate classes and Metasounds that would be able to use the functionality of the passive sound mix. But obviously I'd have to duplicate them all because, yeah, anyway, you all get the idea. A sad reality. But anyway, hopefully all these things get fixed one day and added. I've put some questions out there on forums. I'm not just sitting here. So hopefully people get things. I don't know how to suggest things specifically, but anyway. Having to manually update each sound mix so that a special effect. Okay, so yes, I already talked about this. That was literally what I was just talking about, is the necessity to have an accept feature for parameters so that you don't have to update manually everything anytime anything changes. That's a harsh reality. That's rough. But that's currently how it seems to be, unless I'm missing something. So yeah, that's about all of my gripes. I don't know if I explained them in obviously the perfect way, the best way possible, but I did my best with what I've got. And yeah, I hope you guys understand some of the current problems, some of the struggles I went through specifically, and some of the issues and errors I see with the current way of doing things, and some of the limitations presently that at the very least the blueprints have and the blueprint assets have. I have not played around with this stuff in C++. Whether it's edible in there in any fashionable manner, I am unaware. But granted, most people don't use the C++, and so it's regardless of whether it's possible, and it is important that it is, of course. It needs to also be possible in blueprints, in my opinion. That's where the vast majority of the general populace is working, and so and it's faster in blueprints. It's half the point of blueprints. It's not just simpler, easier to see, helpful for visual learners like moi, but it is faster to program with blueprints. And so obviously there's a necessity of it. There's a reason why Unreal uses blueprints, and hopefully they'll continue to work on them, and hopefully these things will get implemented and fixed in the future, because I presently they seem like errors. I don't see any way of solving any present solution to it aside from what I've done so far, which is just workarounds to the best of our ability. And so, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. That is everything I've had to share with you for now. I have cool ideas for my flying vehicle that in the future. Half the point of this was me just get my feet wet with how I'm going to make sure that this flying vehicle works, and getting used to more of this stuff, which I feel like I'm at a good spot to being able to pursue that. Hypothetically, a flying vehicle, it's going to have Doppler effect. I have an idea for how I can do that. Obviously, I would probably go ahead and since we do have the pitch available to us, thank the Lord, I could probably do Doppler effects and have it dynamic. Great. So happy about that. Sadly, LPFs are still going to be a problem, so I'm not sure how much I'll use those in the future with extremely more complicated sounds and effects. I'm not sure I can make 20 different sound mixes for all these different things. That would be a bit absurd just to get my LPF in there. But anyway, nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you all watching, and how about another explosion? Oh, here, let me demonstrate the duct real quick. The explosion. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you can see how it ducks a little bit. But anyway, obvious stuff. So I will see you all later.